Our next panel is on the horizon for the aquaculture and freshwater fish sector, an area certainly that more than belongs in our protein strategy, something that it'd be great to get an update on the industry and some thoughts from our panelists. So I'm going to introduce our moderator. It's Bruce Hardy. I've known Bruce for, 20 years, something like that, hey? And so Bruce has 20 years of experience leading a software firm. He brings experience of systems design, engineering, and an innate understanding of the complex relation between community health outcomes and dynamic food production systems. Bruce is an entrepreneur. He's really a thought leader. He sees things in systems in ways that some days I go, I don't see that, but boy, that's a great perspective to be able to have in it. So I'm pleased here. I'm making this short, Bruce, but come on up. Bruce Hardy is going to moderate, and Bruce will introduce our two panelists who are going to come up on screen for us. Bruce.
Welcome everyone, and I get the opportunity to follow well-established industries. So thank you very much to the Cattlemen's Association and to the hog industry for opening up the gates to our third protein source in Manitoba, which I hope shows up soon, which is fish. So rather than a long introduction from me, I have a little video that I'd like to play just to give you an idea of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Someone has to strike at that root, and for us, we're just looking at the symptom, and we need to shift from the system to what the real problems are, and us working together in these areas. And again, for me, those areas are, what is my health, what is the health of my family or my community, and then that connection with things like climate change and food security. I see Myera more as a platform technology, an ecosystem. The pill that we are manufacturing actually comes from nature. So we're looking at taking bioactives that we know that can address the eyesight loss in your eyes as a result of type 2 diabetes, and actually attach that to a production process that we can participate in. 80% of First Nations youth will be experiencing symptoms of diabetes in their future, and 80% of those will end up having a portion of their eyesight loss. Over 1/3 of people have undiagnosed diabetes. And especially when over half of the diabetes eye loss is with the middle-aged workforce. There's a lot of people out there that don't realize that putting on that extra bit of weight has serious consequences. And losing your eyesight is one of the most severe consequences you can have. So the significance of diabetes for us, for all aspects of our society, is huge. We're very fortunate where we have a very beautiful fish, and it's called Arctic char. And so Arctic char comes from our northern oceans. Working with that fish, it has a very unique profile to its organic waste that we get to grow algae. And we've selected some strains of algae that allow us to create these medicines. We've been able to work with traditional healers and with people like Dr. Mi Young Soo from the St. Boniface Research Facility to really explore that relationship between those bioactives and saving your eyes from diabetes loss.
It's a really good combination, and what I like the Myera is that they want to develop product based on science. As a scientist also that to develop certain product, I have to be confirmed by myself, indeed that this is working. Myera, in that way, I like it actually that it's a science-based product development. That's the best part.
There's an epidemic of diabetes. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort. But the goal is to have someone come in and tell you that their diabetes is stable. I specialize in traditional medicine, how to mix these medicines, which plants, which roots to mix and develop this medicine. My interests in Myera is the science, how Myera is looking at the medicine side of it to keep it natural.
All of us every day has benefited from traditional medicine in one shape or form. A really good example of that is aspirin. You know, it comes from the bark of a willow tree. So we don't recognize that because we reach for it on the counter at the pharmacy. We're trying to use our products to help to really push a change in thinking. MyEra stands for My Ecologically Restorative Actions. So that means anything we do as a business, we want to be held accountable for. If we used water, how much water did we use? What was it used for? And if we put back water, it has to be cleaner than what we took. I gotta tell my kids that maybe by saving eyes, we can save lives. Because the process in which we're creating that medication to save your eyesight is actually healing your family. Because in order to create that pill, we created a lot of high quality protein for you. Those commodities that we feed the fish created jobs, right? When you start looking at the end, saving eyes, how many lives did we touch in that journey? So the problems that we're facing today are complicated. But that means that the solutions we made have to be sophisticated. Having people to be able to get access to our formulation for eyesight loss would be a really big win. So a lot of you probably don't know it because I speak so much. I was in Australia last week presenting at the Future Food Summit in Brisbane. And the extension of this video that you just saw is that over this last year, with support of the provincial government, you saw LJ in there. But we actually this summer have been using the fish waste from Arctic char to grow a plant-based protein, indigenous wild rice. And so we have done a life cycle analysis and also the first mass balance to look at what is the total amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and what are those ratios of fish pee to poo, if you will, to grow sustainable plant-based protein crops. So fish is late to the game, but when we do, we're gonna make a splash when we get into that. So with this, we need to draw on people that are older than me, and we can tell today's depth of knowledge by the level of gray. So I'll start off with John Holder. So John Holder is joining us from BC. He's a registered professional biologist in British Columbia, and he graduated from Guelph in 1973, and that was 1 year before I was born. That wasn't in the notes, obviously. He started his aquaculture career at the same time. He has an extensive experience in designing land-based freshwater and saltwater systems, including salmonoids, as well as other numerous saltwater species, including shrimp, that can be considered in recirculating aquaculture systems, or RAS systems. So RAS systems are systems that can be done on land, and they recirculate the water. John has worked in the field with numerous companies across 6 countries. And the reason why I myself really enjoy working with John, and I think the banks like working with John, and the insurance companies like working with John, is because John actually has projects that have been going. You can go to the farms, you can meet the operators and say, how does it work? So that's kind of the beauty of John, what he's bringing to the discussion today. William, or Bill Gabraith, holds a Bachelor of Arts honors and a Master's of Natural Resources, both from the University of Manitoba. And yes, University of Manitoba has enormous background in both wild rice. Some of the world's leading wild rice researchers are from University of Manitoba, and we have great aquaculture scientists from University of Manitoba, just saying, let's bring that talent back home. So Bill is gonna help us do that. Bill has been 20 years experience working with inland freshwater commercial fishery in a variety of roles. Bill has worked for 10 years as a commercial fishing program manager with Manitoba Fisheries Branch, as well as served as the manager of the branch's Sustainable Fisheries Unit for 3 of those years. Bill now serves as the lead for the Inland Indigenous Commercial Fisheries Initiative, both with Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and a pathfinder for commercial fisheries development and strategic partnerships, including sustainable fisheries, traceability certification, and collaborative stock monitoring programs for Senior Natural Resources Manager Officer for the Federal Department of Indigenous Services Canada, ISC. So thank you both very much for joining me. And I think everyone is probably very familiar with Zoom and how we have to adapt to this virtual hybrid format. And so everyone can see John and Bill. I'm going to introduce the format of what we're doing today is in a question and answer. And so we are going to start off with the question as being, as the growth in consumer demand for sustainable protein continues, the fish sector has an opportunity to help meet these needs. What is the biggest sustainability trends that you're seeing in the fish and the seafood industry? And so I think we'll start off with John Holder, if that's okay. And then Bill, you can follow in after him.
Thanks, Bruce. Pleasure to be here. Just one correction, Bruce. It's 6 continents, not 6 countries.
I stand
Did you hear
corrected.
that? Anyways, nearly 50 years in the business, and boy, has it changed, even the last 5 years. So the sustainability, the whole key here, I think, is water use and energy use. Both are renewable. And with the systems that are coming out today, energy is number one, I think. Now the systems are, here in North America, we're quite blessed with relatively inexpensive electricity. In Europe and other places, it's not so. That gives us an advantage here in Canada and the United States. And the amount of fresh water we have, and also the saltwater availability to us, is immense. Nothing like it in any other parts of the world. And we've all read about these mega farms, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 metric tons of production per year. To me, they're not sustainable. But what is sustainable are the small farms, 100 metric ton up to 500 tons, 1,000 tons. And I'm seeing that right now in lots of Indigenous communities across Canada. Right now, I think I got 9 projects with Indigenous groups. Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, and Quebec. Ontario as well. And I think it's the future. These smaller farms, and also in the Indigenous communities, First Nations, they want to feed their people. And as Bruce said earlier in his video, you are what you eat. And we all know seafood and fish is such a great protein source. It's got so much going for it. And aquaponics, which is Bruce is doing with wild rice, but also other things can be done. We're doing vines, plants like peppers and tomatoes, cucumbers, plus herbs, lettuces. And the future is here now. And again, forget about the big farms. Let's do the sustainable small farms on Indigenous lands and elsewhere. That's it.
Bill, I'm seeing Bill's thinking right now. He's just like, well, he covered all that, so what am I going to put in here?
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I do have to apologize. I do have to leave about 11:40. I am actually on and catch a flight. So probably the biggest trend, and this is an increasing trend, in the commercial gillnet fishery here in Manitoba, is the growing demand for sustainably sourced fish. Manitoba has lost a few markets because of the fact that we didn't or can't meet a demand for eco-certified fish, but now that market pressure is growing. More and more of our buyers, national and international buyers, are demanding sustainably sourced fish. We've also lost over the years a number of opportunities to supply sustainable fish. That subsequently has resulted in an increased interest and movement to move more of our fisheries into sustainably fishery certification status. Back in 2014, the Waterhen Lake walleye and northern pike fishery was Marine Stewardship Council certified, which represented at that time the first freshwater fishery in the entire Western Hemisphere, as well as only the second in the world. Just recently, last month, our fourth largest fishery by volume, Cedar Lake, became MSC eco-certified. Also, this trend has also resulted in an increased support and involvement from industry in supporting these efforts. As we move more and more into an open market system, this involvement and this partnership from industry is going to be even more critical. This has also resulted in a number of our fisheries, predominantly indigenous fisheries. And just for as a footnote, 85% of our commercial fishers are indigenous, are working towards achieving, or at least looking at exploring, fisheries eco-certification. And finally, there's even more of a growing demand locally for Manitoba sustainably sourced fish.
I'm going to take some time to unpack some of the comments that they said. A lot of people don't realize that as the world's oceans are projected to have more plastic bags in the ocean than fish by 2050. I'm citing that from Facebook. That's on 9 continents. No, I'm just kidding. But it is a really huge issue in terms of the sustainable catch of not only our oceans, but also looking at the sustainable catch of our lakes. So once we determine that sustainable catch, as Bill and John were saying, is that inland aquaculture complements it. And this is what I'm going to use to transition into the next question, is that when you start looking at one of the previous presenters were talking about labor. Well, a lot of the labor has been taken out of fish farming because the engineers had to design something that fits into the bottom of a steam trawler that's out in the ocean for 3 months, and when it comes back, it's headed, it's gutted, it's packaged, it basically goes from the dock to the store type thing. But those equipment needs around 1,000 metric tons, like the size that John is talking about. So if you have now an indigenous community, and so as an example, the fishers from here in Manitoba are catching around 800 metric tons. But that equipment needs around 1,500 metric tons. So you have the inland fishing working with the natural catch fishing to be able to afford these automated systems to address labor shortages and to bring this, again, sustainable food to market. A couple of other quick comments on John. So we didn't mention feed. The other one is that oceans, now we're talking about microplastics. Again, there's a lot of interest in more looking at sustainable feed. Here in the prairies, I can throw a stick in any direction and hit a farmer who can do a camelina or hemp that has those amazing 3s and 6s that we need for fish feed. So when we're talking about fish, we're talking about the entire farming community. Fish feed accounts for 54% of the sale price that you see on the store shelves. Energy is the next one. So here in Manitoba, 3.8 cents a kilowatt hour to 6 cents is what we would be paying. And John's going to be like, that's, in terms of kilowatt hours, that's, your two big costs of goods sold right there. And then obviously we're geodesically the center of North America. So in terms of transportation and our intermodal, I think we're enormously poised. So this is leading me to my second question for these gentlemen is what are the technologies that may support growth of sustainable freshwater fish in the aquaculture sector?
You want to go first, Bruce?
Let's stick with the trend, yeah.
Okay. And I was going to mention the feed, and you're right on. As I said earlier, you are what you eat. And of course, vegetable proteins, they're replacing fish meal and fish oil at a tremendous rate, and we're still getting good quality feed and fish product. So that's huge. And Canada, look, the prairies, they can produce so much. It's unbelievable. So it's a close source to us. Energy. The European systems, right now they're using around 6 to 9 kilowatts per kilogram produced of fish. And then these are salmonids, roughly. But the systems that we're developing, and Meyer as well, they're around 2.5 to 3 kilowatts per kilogram produced. That's a huge saving. And I think that Manitoba is really blessed because you have low power costs. But look at other countries, 25 cents a kilowatt. You know, so if we can take our technology and also export it, we're going to help a lot of communities and Indigenous people anywhere. Like Bruce was just down in Australia. Sure, you know, we can help those Indigenous groups as well by having our technology. What else was I going to say? Then water. With recirc systems, RAS systems, we recirculate 99% of the water. So it's a very low demand of water. But then that water coming in, a borehole, lake, stream, well water source, the best. We can pre-treat that water to make sure that it's good and clean and going into the fish and also going out. As Bruce mentioned, you know, we have to be sustainable. And being sustainable is looking after the waste, which is no longer waste. It's another revenue source. We can take that fish pee, fish poo, use it to grow plants. We can also dehydrate it and use it as fertilizer. So it's a closed circle, which is very important.
Over to Bill.
Well, in terms of technologies, probably the one that really comes to mind right now is working with the province and looking at working with a number of our commercial fishing communities to do a study on the viability of using biodegradable gill nets in our commercial fishery. So far, to the best of our knowledge, and I say that collectively because I'm including my colleagues in the fisheries branch, provincial fisheries branch, we're not aware of too many studies, of any studies, to show the impacts of and the viability of biodegradable gill nets in a freshwater lake system. A lot of the studies have been done in marine fisheries. So that is one of the areas of new technologies. Also, in terms of methodologies and practices, supply chain improvements, primarily in terms of the critical economic infrastructure surrounding the fish receiving stations. There's 32 fish receiving stations located throughout Manitoba's commercial fishery, and the vast majority of those are either owned by the local community or they're owned by the local fisher co-op. And many of these facilities, and they're critical, without these facilities, we wouldn't have in many of our fisheries open water because you need access to ice and slurry to preserve the fish while you're retrieving them in the net, and then also to get them to market. And these facilities are critical for producing that type of ice flakes. And so there is a need to ensure that we do have modern, environmentally friendly, clean, and when I say clean, environmentally clean, critical infrastructure and fish receiving stations. Also, another practice is we've, since 2018, have worked in partnership with the Manitoba Fisheries, as well as we now have 8 Indigenous fisheries working with the province in what's known as the collaborative stock monitoring programs, where basically, in a nutshell, local community members or fishers are trained and equipped to go out and collect fish data, stock information in the same manner as if it was being done by provincial staff. And so that creates a partnership, it creates a shared collaboration, and also it gives the communities and the fishers direct access to the data so that they can start making sound business decisions, up-to-date and accurate business decisions as they want to proceed. And finally, and this touches on looking at where there is opportunities to diversify the commercial fishing activities. There is a couple of communities that are looking at augmenting their commercial gill net fishing activities with the potential of aquaculture. facilities. So that's another new technology and practice that we're looking at.
Thank you both very much. We are down to 5 minutes, so I'm going to do just a little bit of a wrap up and add in some other things that I know that are going on. In terms of high tech and high touch, one of the things that we've been doing with the University of Manitoba is understanding that fish feed conversion. So we actually used machine learning and AI to come up with an exercise program. So as funny as it sounds, you can imagine that no matter how cheap the power is, if you have pumps going as fast as you can and those fish running, what is the optimum amount of swim velocity to convert that feed to white mussel recruitment? So these are the types of things that we're doing, is to better understand the fish. And by doing that, if we exercise them for 2 hours really fast, then the minimum water velocity for the rest of the day is actually quite low. So these are the things that we can actually address sustainability outcomes. The other thing I want to touch upon is in Manitoba, we have very high water intensive industries like the potato industry. They're drawing so much of the fresh water that some of our saltwater aquifers are starting to seep into it. So we need to take some pressure off. So a lot of the stuff that we've been working on with, there's Marcos in the back, and there's some people from the University of Manitoba and Queen's University that are looking at how do we use the salt water in Manitoba. So Arctic char, they start off in the ocean, they come into brackish water, they spawn, and they go back. So how do we work with nature? So I'm a Cree Métis descendant, so everything we do is trying to work with nature and not against it. The final thing that I want to talk about is the economics of it. And again, I started off my presentation by thanking the cattle industry and the hog industry. And it's important because we need the banks and we need the insurance companies. So when you think about a hog farm, just think in your mind that you're stacking those hogs. They don't stack well. Well, guess what? Fish do. So fish not only stack well, if you have a tank, 8 feet of tank, you can imagine all the fish are stacked quite nicely in water. So in terms of CapEx, fish can provide same or greater protein per square foot than a hog barn. The other thing that's really important that John always reminds me of is the protein conversion. So a hog needs 3 kilos of feed to make 1 kilo of protein. Fish is 1 to 1. And it's an enormously sustainable animal-based protein. So I want to thank both of our presenters. I want to see if they have any kind of closing comments, and then if we have any time left over for one question, I think we'll keep it on time and on track. So John, any wrap-up kind of comments?
Yeah, you just hit the nail on right on the head there, because I can put, or my client can put a 500 metric ton farm of Arctic char on 1 acre of land. 1 acre will produce 500 tons. And also, I forgot to mention, is the 100-mile diet. Everybody talks about carbon and energy, but they don't really look at freight. Freight is huge. Why should we buy our fish from Chile when we can produce it in Manitoba? Right next door, right?
Bill, closing thoughts?
Yes, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this panel. The commercial gillnet fishery is very critical here in Manitoba. 42 of our 64 First Nations identify commercial fisheries as their primary non-government service industry in their communities. Culturally, socially, commercial fishing has always played a huge part, both in our First Nation Indigenous communities, but in many of our other non-Indigenous communities. So I see a very bright future. The province of Manitoba is very active in supporting our commercial fishery. The federal government is becoming more increased, and industry is becoming more involved now that we're moving to an open market system, as well as the whole aspect of aquaculture is a growing area of interest in many of these communities. And I see just a very bright future. So thank you very much. Hopefully my comments were helpful and beneficial to this event. Thank you.
So my closing remarks is our call to action. So our call to action for all of you is that you saw something very diverse today. You saw fish, but not only that, you saw us growing algae for medicine. So whether you are a pharmacy looking at how do we get indigenous medicines into the pharmacy, that can come from fish. Maple Leaf Foods, how do we get fish and chicken and pork as ready-to-eat meals? Those purchase orders with indigenous companies or small fish startups are really critical. So those are the things that everyone can do around the table to help us accelerate. You have me standing up here, not the president of a cattlemen's association, or it's just a few of us. But we have the technology. We're using things like CRISPR and DNA to be able to accelerate our understanding of how to create these balanced ecosystems. And that's using fish, and not only that, value-adding fish waste for multiple additional jobs and a very sustainable animal-based protein. I don't know if we have time for questions, but if you do, you can ask Maurice. And the final one is that art, it wasn't a typo. So on our packaging, we're gonna have art from Nunavut for the Arctic char that we're gonna, so if you notice it's not a typo, it's a marketing ploy.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Thank you as well to Bill and John. And we're going to switch quickly to our next session. And so I'll invite Emma